Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr. Speaker, I feel obliged to start this afternoon by congratulating you on your year. I think you've had a very, very good year, sir, stamping your authority on the House. There are always those black moments in anyone's career, and occasionally when one is persuaded by the Parliament's head prefect to take a particular course of action, then there can be an expectation that there might be some disappointment somewhere else. But it doesn't last, and I do congratulate you, sir. I wish your family all the best for this coming Christmas season.
Thank you.
Also want to thank the Clerk of the House for her work this year and for the huge team of people that she has working with her, servicing select committees, etc., making the work of Parliament progress very smoothly. Also, sir, I'd like to thank all of those support staff that have been mentioned by speakers before. I won't rehearse the whole list, but they do make a difference to our lives. We do appreciate them, and we do wish them and their families every success, good wish over this coming Christmas season. Mr. Speaker, one of the highlights for the year, I think, apart from those political things that I'll come to in a minute, in terms of Parliament itself, has been the maturing of the Business Committee and its ability to have an influence on the way in which Parliament works. And I think, sir, we often get into conflicts over bills, and that's appropriate. That's a policy debate that we should always have, and we should set time aside for it. But this year there have been 144 bills passed, and I don't want to go through the stats that I know you're going to talk to the House about later. But when you think about that, not all of them are opposed by everybody in opposition. And I think that the pleasing thing is that we've got to a point where if there are bills that we all agree on, if there are courses of action that we all agree on, then we can have parliamentary processes that allow those things to occur, getting the appropriate scrutiny of the House, as it should, following most often select committee scrutiny, but progressing nonetheless. And this year saw us use 9 occasions where extended hours were granted by the Business Committee, and a lot of business was transacted. In particular, I think if it becomes a tradition in the House, and it always takes time for those things to bed in, that Treaty of Waitangi legislation is dealt in this way, then I think we are on a very, very good track. So I want to offer my thanks to all of those who are on the Business Committee. At the start of the year, the Honourable Trevor Mallard occupied the shadow leader role, and I've got on very well with him. He's a very hard player. He knows what his team want to fight, and he buys that time very successfully. More recently, Grant Robertson coming to the table has seen a continuation of the way in which we can have a discussion about what matters to which party and how time should be allocated. And I'd hate the public to think that we're doing some sort of a cook-up deal here. We are most certainly not. And there is no way in which the Business Committee actually goes about identifying where support lies for particular bills. It's a self-declaration, and in that regard I'd also very much like to compliment Gareth Hughes for his very positive contribution to making the Parliament run smoothly. And Barbara, we always appreciate your contributions. You have a very gentle way of making us all see common sense, and we very much appreciate that. To those who are independents who come to that committee, also their influence is significant, as is the quiet influence of Te Ururoa Flavel, who always makes sure that his party's positions are well represented. So all I'm saying is that we have had a year, I think, where moving from the new standing orders that were promulgated in the year prior, we've seen quite a maturing of that body, and I hope it continues for many, many decades to come. This year, though, sir, saw another huge commitment from our opposition to staying in opposition. I think what we saw with the Labour idle approach was a demonstration for all of New Zealand that it didn't matter which one of them you chose, none of them were up to it. And then, of course, we've seen since this kind of conditional acceptance of David Cunliffe and this hope that you see on the faces over the other side of the House every day, the strained hope that he won't say something stupid, that he won't go off the deep end, that he won't raise his hands in victory before he's even got off the start line, and that he won't start making claims in desperation that opposition leaders often do when they know they're in so much trouble. And the difficulty then is, of course, what's the platform? What is Labor going out to offer New Zealand in 2014? Absolutely nothing. We've got some of the lowest unemployment New Zealand's ever seen. We've got an economy growing at an enormous rate. We've got an education system that is redeveloping itself in a way that I think does give choice, particularly to parents, and gives more than that, information to parents. And they're the sort of things that New Zealanders vote on. We're seeing increases in the numbers of people working in the front lines of law and order, and when it comes to health, this government has a record that is completely unenviable of any government that's ever gone before it. Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, we've had the very successful divestment of some state asset to provide a future investment fund. And this is where the rubber really hits the road. So the first point is New Zealanders still control all of those companies. The second point is the government holds, on behalf of New Zealanders, majority shares in all those companies. So nothing happens with those companies without that shareholder being satisfied. Mr. Speaker, what it also means is that tens of thousands of New Zealanders who lost their money under the reckless days of a Labor government, where any cowboy in town could set themselves up as a finance company, offer dodgy prospectuses and take billions of dollars off New Zealanders, are gone, because they now have some solid blue chips that they can invest in. And just watch what happens to that price, Mr. Speaker. It will rise without a doubt as New Zealanders recognise the value of a secure investment. Mr. Speaker, the real point here, though, is that there is a $4 billion gap, at least, between what we are able to do as a government and what our opponents are trying to promise as a government in waiting. And the only way that gap gets filled up is if the hands go in the pockets of the workers of this country and take more out. And that's what Labor are going to have to campaign on in 2014. They're going to have to go to hard-working New Zealanders and say, we can do everything the other side are doing better, but you're going to have to pay with much higher taxes, much higher charges, and, Mr. Speaker, bigger costs in your daily life because interest rates will rise and everything else that goes with that. Mr. Speaker, we're hearing a lot from the Labor Party about the so-called housing crisis in New Zealand. Well, I say it is a so-called housing crisis because it's only a crisis as long as it remains unsolved. This government has moved in partnership with Auckland to create a huge opportunity for developers, huge opportunities for builders, and they've done the same thing in Christchurch, or we've done the same thing in Christchurch, and we are seeing those consents coming through. We are seeing a change. Under Nick Smith's leadership, Housing New Zealand are probably in the most innovative phase that they've ever been under any stewardship prior to Dr. Smith. So, Mr. Speaker, the question is, how will they fill up the $4 billion gap? The answer is only by tax. How are they going to get their building program done? Mr. Speaker, just on that, might I say a short word to the building supply companies in New Zealand. Don't push your luck. I've had recent experience, sir, of taking some prices for a particular project and found that their price range and differential can be up to 20%. And the high end of that market are the very people who are going out there saying we're seeing escalation in building costs of 1 to 1.5% a month. No government will sit idly and tolerate that, sir. Mr. Speaker, I do want to conclude by wishing every member of the House, even those who heckled me so viciously over the last year, and Grant Robertson in particular, the man who I know feels the cold of my shadow a lot, but I want to assure him that if he is inside that shadow and he steps too close, there's no way he's going to get warm. Mr. Speaker, congratulations to you, sir, for your year, to Mary Harris for the way the House has operated, and to everyone here, a very peaceful, restful and hopefully Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's with a great sense of pride that I rise to speak for the first time, actually, in the adjournment.